Before beginning the round, I would like to just thank our opponents and the judges for a great round. My partner and I have certainly enjoyed it. The order of my speech will be roughly in the order of the last speech, namely being a discussion of the resolution, followed by arguments about education, trade, and Russia. And after all of this, I will provide a general overview of the positions as my partner and I see them now. Before I really jump into it, I'd like to restate the resolution. Resolved that states should maintain, adopt, and implement policies that they deem appropriate for the protection and promotion of diversity of cultural expression on their territory. This is important to mind, particularly on the discussion about the resolution, but also to keep the debate as a whole in context. So let's move on to the discussion about the resolution as a whole. Now, the issue that my partner and I really take with this is not that they talk about multiple states, but rather that they discuss intervention of states, especially in their Russia example, as well as in their trade examples. They are supporting some sort of international intervention in which countries go into other countries or pass policies which affect directly other countries, not their own. That typically states that we are talking about the cultural expressions of states on their own territories, not on other countries' territories. Furthermore, the UNESCO Convention supports the same. The majority of the convention discusses cannot do, or should on their own territories. And the only discussion that they do have about international activity involves international cooperation. In other words, activities in which both countries agree on a cultural expression and sharing cultural ideas. So we continue to argue that the affirmative does not, in fact, affirm the topic. They go beyond the bounds of the topic by suggesting this intervention. So let's move on to the education point. Our main argument continues to be that education simply does not teach the vast majority of cultural expressions out there. You learn how to express your culture and how to be a cultural entity from the people around you, from your family, from your friends. You don't get taught in school what you ought to eat and when, particularly not in school in Arizona. But we also really take issue with this Tucson case. After they made such an issue about it, I looked it up and read about it on a Huffington Post article and found that the law that they're actually discussing bans courses which support the overthrow of the U.S. government, foster racial resentment, are meant for a particular ethnic group, or advocate ethnic solidarity. Another law is supporting diversity. It is against homogeneity. It would seem that the affirmative would actually support this law and the court decision which resulted in the banning of this curriculum, which, might add, does not ban all education of Latin American culture and history and such. It bans a curriculum which specifically taught exclusively Latin American history and culture. Children in Arizona are still learning about Latin American history. They're just learning it along with all other histories in their normal history courses. So this argument clearly is not what the affirmative makes it out to be. And in fact, it should be an argument for the affirmative, because this problem curriculum would never have been passed in the first place if the resolution actions had been taken in the negative world, in which the resolution had been negated, because the country would have never tried to promote this alternate culture. So it should actually, so education should be more of a support for the negative, because this problematic curriculum never would have occurred if we had negated the resolution before it. Let's move on to trade. Very generally, the affirmative does not solve their trade problems. In fact, this can be empirically seen because all of the countries that they discuss, namely Kenya, South Africa, Bolivia, and Peru, all adopted the UNESCO Convention which they talk about. So, despite the fact that all these countries adopted this resolution and are in this international community which recognizes this resolution, they are still experiencing these issues. That's because, as my partner stated, they're suffering from trade abuse. This is not cultural abuse. This is trade and economic abuse. The issues that they're having, in fact, it could be said that their cultures continue to be quite vibrant, particularly with the quinoa example. The quinoa is spreading throughout the entire world. The Bolivians and Peruvians are making quite a lot of money, and lots of different countries who would not normally have experienced quinoa are now getting access to it, because this has been brought to the international market. So clearly, by affirming the topic, this solves nothing. They don't talk about, and in fact, they can't talk about trade solutions at all. This is an issue for the World Trade Organization, for the countries themselves and their economic policies, not for cultural policies. Let's move on to the Russia example. What the AF really fails to understand about this example, and what the problem is that a restriction of an action is itself still an expression. Take Sharia law for an example. That is very clearly still a cultural expression which is very important to many, many people, whether or not you agree with it. And Russia's banning of, or Russia's anti-gay laws are Russia supporting cultural diversity as they see it. In fact, that action that Russia's taking still falls within the topic, still falls within the affirmative. And affirming the resolution does nothing because it discusses specifically states' actions within their own territories. Well, Russia took an action within its own territory, and whether we like it or not, that's what happened. This sort of leads me to the general overview and an argument that my partner made that my opponents did not address at all, which was that countries are forced into this problematic position of supporting all of these various contentious cultures. He gave the rather extreme example of a culture, of a hypothetical culture which might eat their children. Countries still have to support, promote, and protect these if they're to do that. And the fact of the matter is, it's possible to support every single culture because they're so contentious. There's so many. So when a state tries to do this, it really ends up in turmoil. It's ultimately untenable because a state cannot support all various cultural activities and still remain effective. In the negative world, however, we support a government which has a homogeneous culture insofar as is required to maintain civil order, and then we leave the actual implementation of cultural diversity and the preservation of cultural diversity to individuals and the community, which is obviously the most valuable way and the best way to spread culture and for individuals to learn their cultures. We need to allow, states need to allow their people to explore their various cultures themselves without getting involved and messing up everything in their attempts to spread this vision of a diverse culture. Thank you very much.